Hello and welcome to Storytime with Mr. B. I'm Mr. B, this is Hunter, and this story is called Gwynny Comes to Visit. Ellie Welly Woozle and young Nelly Noodle, Ellie Woo and Nelly Noo for short, are my two pets. They're always finding themselves in new places, enjoying new experiences, and often creating a big mess for me, Mr. B, to tidy up. They love a little adventure and can often be found out and about or making fun at home. They'd love you to join them. Close your eyes for a moment and picture Ellie Woo and Nelly Noo in your heads now. Imagine their happy smiles, their waggy tails, and let them give you a cheeky wink. Shall we read on and see what they've gotten themselves into this time? Whoosh! A tennis ball flew through the air from the top of the garden. It zoomed past the vegetable patch, whizzed over the pond, and then bounced off an old oak tree. It was just headed for the ground when wham! It was caught mid-air by a young and athletic border collie. She landed with precision and spun to race back to the kitchen door. Mr. B was standing nearby talking to two people who had come to visit for the weekend. The chaser of the ball was Go-Go Gwynny, a very lively border collie. The ball was picked up and thrown once again. Ellie Welly Woozle and young Nelly Noodle were sitting on either side of Mr. B, feeling rather smug that Go-Go Gwynny hadn't noticed all the adults were eating toast. She was never going to get a cheeky piece of crust if she was halfway down the garden. She'd even passed up on the opportunity of a lion this morning, choosing instead to do a lap around the village with her athletic humans and an out-of-breath Mr. B, puffing along behind. It was another fabulous day. There was a light dusting of cloud floating lazily in the blue sky as blackbirds and skylarks made themselves heard over the hum of a far-off tractor, whirligigging its field. Go-Go Gwynny's humans and Mr. B were having a discussion about what they should do with the day. It was far too fabulous for anything indoors to be a suitable option. The discussion went on with the occasional slobbery tennis ball-based interruption. It was decided that the best option was to head for the park with a bat, a ball, and some jumpers for a game of rounders. The picnic was put together quickly, a little too quickly for Ellie Woo's liking. The chickens were asked to behave themselves while everyone was away, and off they all went, calling out and inviting the neighbours as they walked by. It wasn't long before Boxer Bruno, Playful Poppy, Happy Hector, Bouncy Bonnie, and their human companions were following on behind. Rounders was a favourite amongst the doggy and human villagers alike. They headed to the park, past the play area with only a brief whiz down the slides, and over to the big green playing field. The group was split in two, with a fair mix of humans and doggies on both teams, 7 aside. Nelly found herself on the opposite team to Ellie Woo and Gwynny, but that was okay, as she got to bat first. The game was going swimmingly. Boxer Bruno delivered a beautiful bat off the ball and cruised around the bases. Playful Poppy executed a tremendous diving catch far down the field, and Happy Hector was just happy to be there, pootling around in his very own world. But the star of the show was Gwynny. She was on the fielding team, and every ball that someone else missed was hers. She zoomed around the pitch like a furry rocket, leaping into the air and catching the tennis ball before whizzing back and tapping the posts. Everyone was very impressed, even those on Nelly's team. They clapped as she leapt in the air, and they hooted as she whizzed around the field. Nelly was feeling a little jealous. She hoped that maybe Gwynny was just a great fielder, but when the team swapped around and Gwynny delivered a perfect whack of the ball, catching Mr. B off guard as it whizzed over his head, she started to look down and compare herself to the brilliant border collie. Where Gwynny was lean muscle and taut tendons, Nelly was a little bit rounder. Where Gwynny would race back and forth across the field without losing her breath, Nelly was puffing and panting before she'd reached the second stump. And where Gwynny could hit the ball to the far side of the playing field, Nelly could only get in 3/4 of the way. This made Nelly feel a little sad. Unfortunately, readers, sometimes comparison between yourselves and someone else won't always leave you looking the best. Nelly wasn't so used to this feeling. Her tail drooped and she stood forlornly in the centre of the playing field while the other team took their batting turns. Mr. B was having an amazing game. He didn't often get to see Gwynny's human companions, so this was great, and he'd managed to hit the ball almost every time he'd been up to bat, not to mention the terrific catch he'd managed during Bouncing Bonnie's batting turn. But he had noticed that Nelly didn't seem to be running around with her usual gusto. So when a break was called for tea and biscuits, he popped over to check up on his discouraged doggy. Are you okay, Nellie? He asked with a concerned look in his eye. Nellie sniffed back a tear. I wish I was as good as Gwynny, she said dejectedly, glancing over to where Gwynny was bouncing a ball and her bat. I wish I was as good as Gwynny, agreed Mr. B, but Gwynny dedicates a lot of her time to being great with tennis balls. Did you notice earlier today that while you and Ellie were buttering me up for a bit of my breakfast, Gwynny was doing laps of the garden, playing fetch? Or that when you woke up from your lie-in this morning, Gwynny had already gone for a run around the village? Nellie knew hadn't considered this. And I'm pretty sure Gwynny's sausage consumption is probably considerably smaller than your own, Mr. B added. Nellie's ears had pricked up at the mere mention of sausages. She didn't want to admit it, but Mr. B had a point. Gwynny had put a lot of effort into being an amazing rounders player, where Nellie had put a lot of effort into the acquisition of sausages. Not that there was anything wrong with that. If you want, we can start a more disciplined fitness regime, Mr. B suggested. 5 a.m. starts, lapped around the village, and 2 hours of ball practice a day. We can strike out the sausages and up the celery intake until we've leaned ourselves down a fair bit. This was beginning to sound less appealing. Or, Mr. B continued, seeing Nellie's drop in enthusiasm at this plan, we can both accept that Go-Go Gwynny has earned her right to be considered amazing at rounders by making all those sacrifices with her time. Sometimes comparing ourselves to others isn't a very good idea, and it's always important to consider how that animal got to be that good, concluded Mr. B. Nellie popped a paw to her chin and considered this. She wanted to be the best at rounders, but she also rather enjoyed her lifestyle, which it's important to say wasn't an unhealthy one for a dog. She still went for a walk 1 to 2 times a day and did run around the garden playing with Ellie Woo, but to get to Gwynny's level would require a little too much dedication. She decided instead to enjoy playing for the sake of having fun and went to join Happy Hector for the rest of the break. Completely oblivious to his comparable lack of sporting finesse, he was absent-mindedly looking for blackberries on the nearby blackberry bush. The game resumed and the teams cracked on. Nellie was once again fielding first and had a relatively good quarter. She managed to catch a stray ball from Bouncing Bonnie and was quick to pass the ball back to Mr. B, so he could stop Playful Poppy from scoring a point. Gwynny was just as amazing in this half as she had been in the first, but this time Nellie Noodle was happy to clap along with the rest and give a little whoop when she performed a particularly great catch. The team swapped for the final quarter. After Mr. B had managed to get to the second base, it was Nellie's turn to step up to the batting box. Boxer Bruno prepared to deliver the ball. He swung his arm forward and delivered an excellent ball. Nellie New swung her arm back and let the bat fly. Whack! It was a beautiful hit. The ball soared high into the air, whizzing over Ellie Woo as she jumped to grab it. Soaring past Happy Hector, who was lying in the grass pointing at a cloud, it landed far down the field by the roundabout. Nellie New didn't see any of this. She had sprinted forward to the first base and was now careening past second, closing in on Mr. B as he ran past third. Behind her, she could see Go-Go Gwynny, who had raced down the field, grabbed the ball, and was sprinting like the wind behind her. Nellie zipped past third base as Gwynny came careening past second. It was all going to come down to the final post. Nellie puffed along as fast as her little legs would carry her. She could hear the pant of the upcoming Gwynny. There was mere inches between them as Nellie drove for the fourth post, rolling over the finish line, an ecstatic roar from her team. She was hoisted into the air by a jubilant Mr. B, and then placed back on the ground to a barrage of high fives and well dones. Gwynny, in particular, was very impressed. "My goodness, you were speedy," she barked. Gwynny's team had won the overall game, but it was quite agreed by all the parties that the match had been a tremendous one. As with most sports, it was the playing of the game rather than who won that was the most important. Nellie was happy that she'd given it her best. She shook hands with the players and told Gwynny what an amazing rounders player she was. Gwynny was very pleased by this. She had worked extremely hard to get as good as she had, and hated to think of all the sausages she had to miss out on. It was time for a second run on the picnic. Sandwiches were handed out and enjoyed, while all the players were treated to a little bit of goat's milk. The sun was high in the sky, and there was still a lot of panting going on, So it was decided on the way back the happy troop could pop by the river. They turned right as they left the park and went down a side lane to find the riverbank. Ellie, Nellie and Mr. B loved this spot as the rocky underbed suddenly slid down into the deep plunge pool. You could walk along the side, sit down, slide in and swim to the other side, where you could then climb out and repeat the process all over again. Nellie and Ellie jumped in with a splash. The water slide was quite as fun as the slides in the park, with the added bonus of getting wet and soggy. Splash, gurgle, whoosh! The water was going everywhere as Nellie and her companions jumped and slid into the pool. It was at this point Nellie noticed Gwynny standing to the side. She hadn't been in once yet. Nellie clambered over to her. "What's up, Gwynny?" she asked in a kindly manner. "Oh, I'm not the best swimmer," replied Gwynny, looking a little bashful. Nellie hadn't expected that. She thought back to the previous year trying to swim like the other animals and how it had felt when she struggled and had been laughed at by Danny Duck. Since then, she'd come on leaps and bounds and was now quite the little aquadog. "Let's hold hands and slide in together," she suggested. "And then we can doggy paddle to the other side. I'll show you how." And they did just that. They did it once, then again, and again. It was great fun watching Gwynny progress, and very soon she was sliding in by herself and stroking across the water with ease. The soaked squad stayed there for a good few hours before it was time to head home. Everyone said their goodbyes and headed back for supper and bed. Gwynny and Nellie walked side by side, now the best of friends. The end. Thank you for watching, guys. I've been Mr. B. This is Hunter. Like and subscribe. Today's stories were written and the art was drawn by me, Mr. B. Thanks very much. We'll see you later.